17th of June 2025. It's always a pleasure to have your company, depending on which part of the globe you are. Thank you so very much for joining us. We are back this evening again with another public lecture with Hon.Halifa Sallah, the Secretary General and party leader of the PDIS. Halifa Sallah is a doyen in Gambian politics, and of course, who Gambians would always want to listen to, want to hear from in different issues. And of course, today we are back again to discuss some very prominent or pertinent issues that are not only, of course, concerning Gambia, but Africa, to say the least. And not long ago, we were here for another public lecture on the Gambian Constitution. But today, we are discussing the International Day of the African Child, or known as the Day of the African Child. And of course, Hon.Halifa Sallah will give a lecture on the Day of the African Child, of course, on the theme of the future of Africa and the African child. For the next 120 minutes or so, it's going to be all about that with him. And of course, I hope wherever you may be, you can interact with us. Let us know what you think about whatever we are going to discuss or the conversation we are going to have with Hon.Halifa Sallah. And, it's an opportunity for you to share your comments and contributions on our various social media platforms, wherever you are. Thank you so very much once again. This is Eyeafrica TV broadcasting live from our studios in Banjul. I am Amadou Kante, and thank you for joining us. Mbokk yi ñu ngi leen di nuyuwaat beneen yoon fii ci Eyeafrica TV ñu amaat mbégte àndaat ak yéen ci beneen jotaay ji am solo bi nga xamante ne comme ni ngeen ko xamee Eyeafrica TV yàgg ko ànd ak yéen ci jotaay yu mel nii tey tamit ñu amati mbégte indiwaat leen beneen public lecture ànd ci ak ki nga xamante ne mooy Hon.Halifa Sallah nekk njiitali parti bi di PDIS. boo leen fàttale ko bu yàggul rek lañ fi amoon beneen public lecture mu def ci jàngat bu yaatu jàngat bu am solo li aju ci of course sartay réew mi mooy constitution bi naka la ñu war a mun a def ba fexe loolu mu doon lu am solo ci réew mi waaye ñu am bi nga xamante ne dina njëriñ askani réew mi tey tamit ñu dëkkaat war a àndaat ak yéen ci beneen waxtaan. This time nag du mbiri Gambia kese mun naa wax ne Afrique yëpp la ndax li tax mu ñëw doon na li nga xamante ne lu am solo la ndax ñu ngi bugg a waxtaane li nga xamante ne mooy di Day of the African Child. Bëgg nañoo xam lu bari ci li tax Afrique di ko màggal buñ ko tàmbalee di màggal depuis 1991 ak léegi doon na lu yàgg tey nag Hon.Halifa Sallah incha allah dinañu ci indi jàngat yu yaatu ñu fas yéene àndaat ak moom ñu am mbégte dalal naa ko fii ci Eyeafrica TV waaye yéen ñuy seetaan tamit ngeen am opportunity mun a bokk ci conversation bi mooy ci waxtaan bi mun ngeen joxe seen ay xalaat seen ay gis-gis ci lépp lu mu fee waxtaanee mun ngeen koo def ci suñu various social media platforms yi ngeen si seen ay comments bu ci kanamee danaa fexe am lu ma ci tànn rek yéggee ko bu dee laaj la bu dee li ngeen bugg a leerlu la moom mu indi ci tontu incha allah ci biir waxtaan bi ñu ngi leen di gërëmaat bu baax a baax ci ànd bi ngeen di ànd ak Eyeafrica TV waaye surtout nag ci safoo bi ak qualité bi di leen wax jërë ngeen jëfati waaye tamit su ko defee ñu jox kàddu gi rek Hon.Halifa mu nuyu ak suñu viewers yi bu pare incha allah nag ñu tabbi ci waxtaan bi lu yaatu dina ci ñëw bu baax. Hon.Halifa, thank you very much once again for joining us. It's a big pleasure to have you here once again, and I will just allow you to extend your warm greetings to our esteemed viewers watching you right now across the globe. Welcome.
Well, this is a partnership we are building.
Thank you.
Where it will end, no one knows.
Indeed.
But it's based on the realization that a country is built based on the collective intelligence of its citizenry, requiring for us to have this type of conversation on a continuous basis. That is how you build a nation. So we are participating in that process of building mindsets. And that is inconceivable without this type of conversation. So we appreciate your openness for such a construct in the polity of the country. And we also appreciate the interest people are showing.
Indeed.
And we hope ultimately all of us will get benefit from it, and the nation will get the ultimate benefit.
Fantastic.
In terms of development.
Thank you. I will just allow you also to...
kontaan nañu pour dellusiwaat wante lenn moo leer suñ ne réew benn nit taxul ñëpp a tax li ñëpp moom nag ñëpp ko war a waxtaane moo waral li ngeen ubbeeku pour façon yi waxtaan yi mun a door tardé na sax lii moo waroon a dundal xeli nit ñi ndax xeli nit ñi ci lañ war a wéeru pour liggéey réew bon nag yaatal waxtaan ci biir askan wi ba ñëpp a xamandoor ñëpp a liggéeyandoor yaakaar naa ne loolu mooy isi jëm kanam bu gaaw ci réew lii mooy jubluwaay bi ñu gërëm ñëpp nag ne ñu ngi bokk ci mbir mi
incha allah jërëjëf honorable ñu amati mbégte lool ci ànd ak yow ci jotaay bi noo ko waxee la partnership la mooy diggante Doi ak Eyeafrica lu yàgg la suñ la waxtaan bi sax wax nga ci ay sernde yu am solo ñu am ci mbégte nag lool incha allah ci noonu tamit ñu wax rek ne am na ñi nga xamante ne ñu ngi teew fii fekkee jotaay bi ñoom tamit incha allah ne leen may opportunité bu ci kaname bu amee lu ñoo laaj ci honorable ñu def ko bu fekkee tamit seen contribution buñ war a def la loolu tamit opportunité dina am comme yéen ñu nekk di seetaan tamit incha allah mun nañ ko àndee ak yéen waxtaan bi nag ci dinañ ko jaxas baxas ndax honorable dana def lecture bi ci English of course pour ñu gën a comprehend lan la ñu bugg a wax waaye tamit dana ñëw ci kàllaama suñ la kàllaama yi mu gën koo faram-fàcce pour ñu gën a understand bu baax ñu am tamit luñ koy laaj ci loolu incha allah comme danañ koo def ci anglais just like I said the conversation, of course, would be done in English and, of course, in the local language as well. But just to start with, just to give a brief introduction or history about the African child, the International Day of the African Child, also known as the African Day of the Day of the African Child, has been celebrated on June 16 every year since 1991. So we are doing this conversation a day after it was celebrated in 2025. That was yesterday. And when it was first initiated by the OAU, there's the Organization of African Unity. And this day honors those who participated in the Soweto uprising in 1976. All right? And the Day of the African Child pays tribute to the 1976 students uprising in Soweto, that is, of course, in South Africa, which resulted in the killings of students who demonstrated against the poor quality of education they receive and demanding to be taught in their own language by the apartheid regime. So this is just a brief, and I know Honorable will of course will come in much details on this conversation in a moment. Of course, I just wanted to open this. So, Honorable, before I allow you to move on to the podium to start the lecture, I have one or two questions to ask before we proceed. I just want to ask you first, why do you think it is important to have such a conversation, especially, more than 30 years since this, this organization or, the day was initiated by the OAU?
The future depends on us and the young people must inherit what we build today. So it's always important that we set certain days to be days for stock taking, to find out how far we have gone to address certain challenges posed by our own practices, by our own method of ruling a country. What happened, as had been said, is the subject of this conversation.
Indeed.
And I will address the question in a more significant way in the lecture itself.
Indeed.
But it is important that we look at the past, not to live in it, but to assess how far we have gone to address the challenges of the past. And I am sure that if we continue to do that, we'll prevent ourselves from repeating the mistakes of the past. The objective of such commemoration is to prevent us from repeating what has happened in the past.
Lesson has to be learned.
Lessons has to be learned.
Indeed. But before I allow you to go, finally, of course, like you said, I know you will answer my questions in much details when you given these lectures. But of course, why do you also, why do Africa needs to commemorate such a day? And of course the benefits around it as well, if I can ask.
Well, if you know exactly what happened on that day and what apartheid was, with a population deprived of ownership of self. We're not talking about even ownership of country, but ownership of self. To dehumanize the person so that you will not see yourself as a human being, to see yourself as a lesser human being on your own soil. That's what was happening in South Africa. That's what apartheid meant. It meant that you were inferior to those who came and occupied your land and became settler colonialists, took over all your lands and leave you with 13% of the land that they felt was not even fertile. And not only that, deprive you of every element of development, whilst they utilize your own resources for their own development. And people will say, the white people were intelligent. Look at, up till now, people seem to be saying that the reason why South Africa is what it is because it was first ruled by people of a different color.
Absolutely.
That mindset still exists.
Yeah, indeed.
So it means that we must commemorate this day in order to interrogate all that, so that we begin to reshape our thinking, our mindset, to reshape our own destiny. Without reshaping our mindset, we cannot be architects of our own destiny. That's why it is important to start this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable. Now I'll allow you to move to the podium so we can start this lecture in much details. And once again, thank you for joining us. We are live on Eyeafrica TV, and wherever you are, thank you for joining us. And I hope you'll be with us for the entire program so we can hear more from Hon.Halifa Sallah on the importance of this day, the Day of the African Child, and some of the lessons that we need to learn as people, as Africans, as young people in particular. And like he said, it's a moment of reflection, and there's a lot to be reflected over this day that we believe would help us as people and as a continent as well. So I think, Honorable, if you're set, I would just allow you to pick it from there and be listening. It's over to you.
History is not made by words. It is made by deeds. And when others make it, it is the duty of others to narrate it. Without narrating our own history, we'll not be able to define who we are. And others will narrate it for us, and they will define who we are. And that is why it came to a point where many Africans felt that we didn't even have a history, because nobody taught us who we were. And we cannot be a people until we know who we are. And that is the objective of this conversation. This is a day that is commemorated one day after the day of commemoration. We wanted to hold this lecture yesterday, but it wasn't possible, but we still have to hold it today. This day is not an ordinary day, the day of the African child. In 1991, South Africa was moving from what it was, apartheid, towards being what it is today, a sovereign republic. And the OAU saw the need to accompany South Africa towards that journey, which became complete in 1994, when Nelson Mandela became the president of a new republic. But children paid with their blood for that liberation. And children who should inherit what their fathers and forefathers bequeathed to them decided to pay with their blood so that others will live a better life. This is what has made human society to be what it is. Others value life, but they value it so much that they are ready to give their life for that life to be preserved. That investment is not an ordinary investment. And that is why, when it is made, it should be remembered. Soweto, 1976, thousands of young people, tens of thousands, marched to demand that the type of education that they restricted to them was not the type of education that was fit for them. They wanted to be educated in their own languages, but at the same time given education which will give them the dignity that they deserve and the future that they wanted. A fairer, a better, a more prosperous existence. But apartheid felt that that was not the future that they deserved. What they deserved was the bullets. And over 100 of them were sent to their graves. In commemorating that day, our minds, our hearts, our hands, our will must be tempered in a new way. To take what happened as inspiration, that we are being charged to sign a contract with nation and people, continent and people. A contract to give that mind, that heart, that might in our hands, that will, to country and people, to continent and people, to humanity at large. That we will become an instrument that will prevent what happened that day from ever repeating itself. If it does, to stop it and eventually ensure that it never exists again. Children are the flowers of society. A flower must be pollinated. It's the ovules that ultimately produce the seed that make the plant to go on and on, to replicate itself, to replenish the earth. When the flower dies, the seed dies, and the plant becomes extinct. So if we are incapable of nourishing this flower, the African youth, so that it becomes pollinated, to be able to produce the seeds, then we are facing an existential threat. It means that we'll become extinct as a people. And no human being should accept to commit suicide by your own volition. So we are here to look at two issues: the future of the African child but also the future of Africa. Because the two are interconnected. They are irretrievably linked. Without Africa, there can be no African child. Without a future for Africa, there can be no future for an African child. And that is why this lecture is so fundamental. It's not only about what happened in Soweto in 1976. It's about what is happening today. And not only today, but tomorrow. Because the future must be built today. The child must be protected today, and that's the only way to protect the future. What type of societies are we to build? That is what we are being asked. Where are we now? Where do we go from here? How are we to get there? This lecture is designed to address these fundamental questions. Where are we? We are told that 1 billion human beings out of 6 billion are living in abject poverty. And over 530 million live here in our continent. With a population of 1.4 billion. And most of these poor people are children. So you look at these statistics, they tell us this continent is poor. They classified our countries as heavily indebted poor countries. Others classified our countries as least developed countries. And out of the 46 so-called classified least developed countries, you will find 32 African countries being listed. Is this what Africa should be? Are we proud of that? Can we continue to say, well, the Western world is depriving us of development? They have enslaved our ancestors, colonized our fathers. Now we cannot even cross the Mediterranean to go and comfortably live in that part of the world. They are building up their security forces so that they can hunt us house to house in order to force us, just as the ancestors were being forced to go that part of the world, now to be forced to come back to what they say is a land of poverty, heavily indebted poor countries, least developed countries that we don't want to belong to. We want to escape from. What is wrong? That's what we need to interrogate. How can you own a land and hate the land? You own land and you said, I don't want it because it cannot offer me the type of life that is fit for me to live. Something is wrong. Fundamentally wrong. And it should prick our conscience. We are being forced to look at ourselves and ask ourselves again, are we proud of who we are? If we are not, why are we not proud of who we are? It's because this land is not providing us with the food we want, with the clothes we want, with the housing we want, with the schools we want, with the hospitals we want, with the quality of life that we want. We are convinced that the human being deserves quality life, a life that will give you happiness, a life of prosperity, a life of dignity, a life of liberty. That's what we believe. And that's what we are searching for. And if we don't have answers, we grope in the dark. We move into the wilderness in search for it. Either we die or we get it. That's what we are confronted with. But it is very interesting that looking at the statistics, they said your countries are heavily indebted poor countries. I look at America, they said, well, America's debt is $36.2 trillion. $36.2 trillion. And America's GDP is only $29 trillion. Its debt is more than its GDP. We said that is a rich country, but it is indebted. They tell us the G7 are the richest countries, more industrialized countries in the world. Who are they? The United States, Japan, Canada, France, United Kingdom, Italy. So we are told that these are the richest countries, so-called, in the world. But then we look at Germany, 2.9 trillion indebted. We look at France, 3.6 trillion indebted. We look at Italy, 3.2 trillion indebted. We look at United Kingdom, 2.8 trillion pounds indebted. All of them are indebted. We said China is the example of the world. Africans must rush to China. It can guarantee you billions, 50 billion loans. We say China, 18 trillion. 18 trillion indebted. 18 trillion indebted. America, 36.2 trillion indebted. India indebted. Brazil indebted. All of them indebted. They are indebted rich countries. You are indebted poor countries. The whole world indebted. What is wrong? And that is why America is saying we must save ourselves now. Because you are exporting more to us than we are exporting to you. We are getting more and more indebted. This year alone, America has to raise $10 trillion to pay debt that is due now. That is why, even though the government had the plan to cut down on debt, because that is the battle cry of their party, and that is why a technological guru, as they said, who supported a particular party, ultimately said, no, he's now leaving because these people are going to go to Congress to increase the debt. The person does not know economics. That America has no choice. It has to produce the wealth to pay, or at least get more money to pay. It must borrow to pay. They are borrowing to pay. So that is why if you look at the economy of the world, they have ratings for being credit-worthy, for being debt-worthy. And that's where our differences lie. And that's the advantage they are using against our nations. whilst our thinkers, in fact, would tell you, if America can have 36.2 trillion debt, why shouldn't Gambia have 110 billion debts? You know, that is the way of the world. So the brains accept that to be the way of the world. But whilst they can get the debts because of the credit ratings, they've created the machinery. Fish, one. Moody, no. S&P, another. 3 bodies that rates that this country know, you know, your GDP is too low, so you cannot go and borrow. This one, yes, you can go and borrow because your GDP is at this level. So you can go and borrow and even give loan to the other one. China goes to the World Bank, get 40 billion, and can come and give loan to African countries. So when you look at the IMF and the World Bank, you just see only America, you see UK, but you don't see that China is part of the World Bank. It's a shareholder. In fact, third shareholder. Apart from Japan and America, China follows. So they are investors. They're investors in American bonds. So that's how the world is moving, to our disadvantage. So unless we have knowledge, we cannot liberate ourselves. Because for them, they are compelled by necessity to find ways and means of managing to survive. It is becoming more and more difficult, but they are trying to find a way out. But the world is telling us there are solutions, but we must search for them and find them. And we must have independent minds, independent thinkers. And that's why we're having these public lectures, to transform all of us into thinkers, because it's only thinkers who can become innovators. It is only thinkers who can become builders. Development cannot come from the sky. It never did, it never will. It must come from our brains. But we must exercise those brains to search for the answers, and we'll find them. But the determination must be there. The will must be there. The heart must be there. The mind must be there. And the energy must be devoted to it. Then we'll find the answers. The answers are there for Africa, and that is why we search knowledge from history, help to understand the past, understand the present, to shape the future. And I will be very brief here, and then we'll move to the solutions. Looking at African history, in order for you to understand the problems of today, we discover a particular experience that I will compare with a particular experience in Europe. Then we move to the lessons. We were told that there was a Mali Empire between 1312 and 1337. That around 1324, somebody called Mansa Musa Keita went on a pilgrimage to Mecca. And he took so much gold that in fact in Cairo he was patronizing people, that inflation in fact increased in Cairo because people had so much money and they could not get goods to buy. And a whole trade was built up between the Middle East and Africa, that part of Africa, because of the gold that it had in possession. Mali still has those gold deposits. But around that time, you will find out that between 1337 and 1453, there was the 100 Years' War between England, King of England, and King of France. The war was so bitter, 100 years. So where was the stability? Where was the unity of Europe? And because the King of France was captured in England, they had to pay ransom. In 1360, they had to mint gold coin, and that gold coin you will find the king walking and the king on a horseback. That was the character of the gold coin, to give to England in order to rescue their king. So gold was becoming money. Just imagine how valuable that gold was. And if that Mansa Musa Keita lived in a different times and understood what that gold meant, and that kept that gold in a treasury, that gold can be used anywhere. Just as he went to Cairo and could buy the whole of Cairo, that Mansa Musa with that gold could have bought the whole world. And that's how finance capital is happening today. You have a bank, have the resources, and that's what is happening to you. Saudi, Kuwaiti fund, all different types of funds. From where? From oil money, invested. Where is Norway getting its money? From oil money, invested. All these big companies that you see that engage in IT, all these telephones, smartphones, you find investment. You see, capital is no longer an individual country, it's multinational. And now you can invest, you can be in the Gambia, take all your money and invest it, and another company will use it, and they build bigger companies from that money. But it will be resident in a particular country. So this is the lesson that Africa should have learned, that these countries had to fight among themselves. Empires defeated empires until they built up their nation states, and ultimately they became the nation states they are. And they sent their merchants all over the world and began to accumulate the gold and build up such mighty treasuries that continue to invest more and more to take charge of the world. Today, if you look at Switzerland, it's a land of plenty. But 2/3 of the gold produced in this world is processed in Switzerland. And if you look at their GDP, this constitutes the biggest, largest share of their GDP, because they have specialized in processing and exporting gold. If you look at the cocoa that comes from Ivory Coast and from Ghana, you go to Belgium, the first thing is to see that chocolate is a delicacy. It's a national pride. But the cocoa is not produced there. So if you ask them, they will say our trade with Africa is very little because they are just producing raw materials. We are told that South Africa is now the top economy in Africa, importing and exporting over $100 billion worth of products. But then, who are they exporting from? Who are they importing from? Who are they exporting to? Who are they importing from? It's China, it's US, it's Germany, it's India, it's those countries. You find the list, very few African countries. So this is our reality. That's why you cannot find the jobs in Africa, because we have not accumulated into the banking structures, we have not invested in the productive base, and therefore we cannot export much. We are importing everything we are consuming. So this is why Africa must exist, because Africa is a cooperation. It has immense wealth, but unless we put the wealth together, pull it together, then it will not be able to impact on the productive base, and therefore we will not be able to live as equals to other parts of the world. That's how Pan-Africanism arose. And I'm coming to the solution. That's how it arose. What we are now realizing is what they realize under a different context. We are realizing now because we are independent countries, but we are still poor. We are realizing now, even though we have central banks, to mint our money, we have to go outside. Even though Sékou Touré struggled against the French, not to be controlled, but after breaking from the CFA zone, they still had to go to another European country to mint the Guinean money. So you do not break the chains. You hear people now, even, well, a country has carried out coup d'etat and is rebelling against Western, but then at the end of the day, you ask, where will the money of that country be taken to for minting? Who will they be exporting to? Who will they be importing from? You still see that you leave one dominion and fall under another dominion. So we must look for solutions. And the Pan-African view has given us the solutions. We've not shared it, and we need to share it. It arose after the First World War, when Africa was divided among the colonial powers. The colonial powers could not agree because their interests clashed. They were competing for raw materials, they were competing for markets. And just as you see now, where America is saying, no, 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 your goods cannot come here, we'll impose tariffs. That's what was happening. It's protectionism, that I will protect my local industry from your goods so that they will not come in, unless you accept my goods to also come into your country. But at that time, you had colonies. And bulk of the raw materials came from the colonies, bulk of the markets constituted the colonies. So they could fight wars to take colonies from each other. That's what happened during the First World War. And that's when Pan-Africanism gave answers to the children of Africa that I am here to emphasize today. After the defeat of Germany and the rest, they had a meeting in Versailles, France, in order to condition Germany to pay for reparation for the war. But African thinkers, like Du Bois, felt that people of African descent need to be careful not to take sides that they have already taken during the fight. That the colonial powers had engaged the sons of Africa in their war, but ultimately they will come and dominate them again. To prevent that, he encouraged thinkers of African descent to meet in Paris, whilst the powers that be were meeting to decide on how to share the booty of the war. Of course, it was very difficult for them to have a place to meet and support from the French government. But something happened that we should note. France was very skillful in creating certain communities in its colonies and allow those communities to elect certain individuals to represent them in the French parliament. So they became deputies in the French parliament. So you can imagine an African at that time being elected to be part of the French parliament. So a person like Blaise Diagne was elected. But then to pay for that statue, he was able to mobilize more than 100,000 soldiers from the continent to go and fight for France during the First World War. And because of that, he was given immense respect by the French authorities. So Clemenceau agreed that they could hold the first Pan-African Congress in France in 1919 by virtue of that. And when they met, they came up with a program that all of us must take note of. It's a 10-point program. They told those who won the war that we don't want you to go back and take those colonies of Germany under your fold and make them colonies. We must develop a trusteeship system where you will gradually prepare those people for independence and self-determination. And the program they established 4 fundamental pillars that are relevant up till today if we are to truly take charge of our destiny. One pillar creates an African identity for us to know who we are as an African people and accept that we must become a sovereign people. The second pillar is that we must move towards self-determination and independence. The third pillar is that we must become sovereign republic and a sovereign people. And the fourth pillar, the governments must exist for the people and not the people for government. And the people must engage in activities that will lead to self-reliance and self-determined development. Then our emancipation will be complete. They prepared a program that should lead us to that. Number one, they emphasize that the land, our natural resources must be held in trust by the state, not owned by the state. The land and the natural resources must be held in trust by the state And because it is held in trust, it is owned by the people. So we are talking about people's ownership of the wealth of nations. So we must take that mindset out that makes us feel that a state who owns. When it comes to the ownership, it's the people who own. So the fundamental law then is that the people should have access to as much land and natural resources as they can put into productive use. That is the first law of development. Ensuring that our people have as much land and natural resources as they can put into productive use for their development. Number one. That yes, if you're not putting the natural resources and land into productive use, but others are capable of doing so, do not disallow it. So yes, number two, you can allow investment. Investment will be encouraged, but on two conditions. One, it should not lead to the exploitation of the people. You cannot allow you to come to our land and the owner of the land falls under your subjugation. That is unacceptable. That yes, you must invest, but number one, you will not be able to exploit our people. Number two, you will not exhaust our resources. You will not exhaust our resources. So number two is established. Number three, that if we give you concession, it must be limited in time. There must be a time limit to it. Now, we have mentioned three things. Let's draw examples. You have Ports Authority in the Gambia. You had a bridge, or still have a bridge. Somebody comes and say, I will give you $100 million. Then you allow me to manage this bridge for 25 years. $25 years. So this bridge can only generate income if transport from Senegal continue en masse to pass. But what about if Senegal decides to take another route other than your bridge? Then how will those people get back their money? Is it not going to be to increase all the rates of crossing of Gambians to get back their money? Will they have charity and say, oh, we have soft heart for Gambians, we will not increase? They must get back their money. Now you generate 100 million from that. Let's estimate it as $7 billion. Somebody comes and says, give me your Ports Authority so that I can manage it. I'll pay the workers whatever I want to pay them, make them work as hard as they could so that I can generate my income. But I'm willing to invest 20.5 million euros, equivalent to maybe $1.5 billion. Now you're supposed to make 7 billion from the bridge. You should have had 1.5 billion from there that you can invest at least in your Port Authority to improve what that company comes to invest. But no, you will also allow that company to control, and then you become a shareholder. Is that in line with what the Pan-Africanists were declaring at the time? Of course not. That's why they had the vision that Africa should be united, so that you will not be these single units that will look for somebody to save you to try to manage your own affairs. Because an African investment bank would have been there to come to your support, a bank that you would have been a shareholder to come to your aid. So therefore, concession being limited, if it's 25 years, that's what it means. When you are making concessions, know how long should it take. When you are making concession for somebody to take charge of something. So they guided the African leaders. If they really wanted to be guided, the knowledge base was there. Number 4, they emphasize that even though we allow you to invest, we must also tax you so that we can meet the growing social needs of the population. We are coming to education. The right to education cannot be guaranteed without a resource base. So therefore, the investment into the productive base is designed to generate enough resources to meet the cost of education. You will see what they say about education. So therefore, taxation has a purpose. It is to meet the growing social needs of the population, health, education, housing, and all others that the people need. It goes further to give us right, to protect our rights, that forced labor, corporal punishment, all this must be abolished. Slavery, all must be abolished. But you look at your countries today, up till now, certain remnants of slavery exist. And you close your eyes to it. I can just imagine you invite the President of the United States to Ghana, and then they go to a local chieftaincy, and then you take this hammock that they have, and then just how they carry the chiefs, then you put the President of the United States to say, well, I'm with the chief, so what the chief does also I will do. And then you carry the President of the United States with this hammock. What will the world say? But then we say this is tradition. Tradition that should be maintained in a republic. The Pan-Africanists said that all remnants of slavery should be abolished. It is talking about the sovereign person emerging, the sovereign African emerging. That is what is going to strengthen us as a people. The reason why we are still weak, we'll see it. Why we are still divided, we'll see it. Because the mindsets that should have changed based on these fundamental principles had not changed. They emphasize now to education that each child must learn to read and write in his or her own language, including the language that was left by the colonial master. Each child in your own language. Can you imagine if that's where we started, where Africa would have been by now, and where our languages would have been by now? They would have been depositories of knowledge, just like Chinese, any other language. Because language must live. They can only live if you write, if you read, if you produce knowledge on the basis of that language. That's why Arabic is living. Arabic is living. Every language can be a living language, but you must breathe life to it by breathing knowledge into it. That's what the Pan-Africanists said at the inception. Not only that, they're saying you must also be taught in one industry, technical industry, not only knowledge, but also skills. So they were preparing the young person to be able to be productive, to take charge of our self-determined development, to be self-reliant. That's what they were preparing for. Not only that, they said the teachers must also, first, the child must be taught at public expense, free education. At public expense, free education. Then it goes to the sixth pillar, that the teachers must also be trained with knowledge and culture and skills. Culture is a way of life. Their mindset must be changed. You must train. The training must include culture, thinking, way of life. So what way of life? The way of life of the Republic, of the sovereign person, of bringing a new African into being. And we'll know what type of African. That teacher also must be taught knowledge, skills to teach the child, but at public expense. What justification do we have for telling teachers to pay for their education, when these are the parents? Teaching is a quasi-parental responsibility. You are, let's call it, just as you have paralegal services, teacher is a paraparental service. You are a parent. You spend so much life with the child, sometimes more than the parent. So if society doesn't have that, what are you going to do with your children? So therefore, that teacher should be trained at public expense and maintained at public expense, because that teacher is a para-parent, is supporting the parent, is replacing the parent at a given stage when the parents cannot be present. They emphasize that we must move to the next stage, that Africans must participate in government, to the point that government must exist for the people and not the people for the government. So the objective of government is to serve. It's not for the people to be paying taxes just to maintain certain officials and a bureaucracy. But it is for that government to serve education, health, construction of roads, everything that is necessary for people to live in prosperity. That's the responsibility of a government. It emphasizes, finally, that it's not only enough to participate in government, but finally, we must have an Africa where leadership must be determined by the consent of the people. That shows what a republic is all about. Leadership based on the consent of the people. So democracy is not borrowed from anyone. In 1919, when the Pan-Africanists were saying this, many countries in Europe never thought about what democracy was. If you know the history of Spain, history of Portugal, you will know that some of our countries, in fact, became republic before they became republic. They had dictatorship of the worst type. So we should know ourselves, know our country, know the world. Then we'll be the architects of our own destiny. We must know ourselves, know our country, know the world. Then we can be no slave to anybody on the face of the earth. We must know ourselves, know our country, know the world. Then we cannot be dictated to by anybody on the face of the earth. That is when we become fully independent in mind. That's when we break the chains. And that's what the Pan-Africanists aim to do. we move towards conclusion.
Yes, I was going to say that. I'll allow you to wrap.
I saw you moving. I said that let me move towards conclusion immediately. So we, in 1945, got a group of Africans together who spoke the language of the Pan-Africanists in 1919 and agreed to translate a program into action by coming to work for the decolonization of the African continent. 1957, Ghana broke the chains, and Dubois wrote a letter to Nkrumah telling him that now is the time for Africa to look at itself and take ownership of the continent and not allow the continent to be taking sides in somebody else's fight. To stand in between Asia and Europe, take the best from each of these continents, but work to build an African child who will not be a stool pigeon. You know, they have this pigeon, they just put them there wherever you direct them. No. They'll not be anybody's stool pigeon. But they will be very dignified, conscious, industrious, children of knowledge and character, capable of building a new life for the continent, a life that will be an example to others. That it was time to utilize the resources of Ghana to help facilitate the transformation of the whole continent. So you can see Nkrumah's words, the liberation of Ghana was meaningless unless it was linked to the total liberation of the continent. That is why solidarity was given. Until today, 55 countries are part of the AU, 52 republics, 3 still monarchies. And we have an African Union. We talk about an African Central Bank, an African Investment Bank, an African Monetary Fund. They have Pan-African Parliament, a Court of Human Rights. So all the institutions are there. When the OAU was established in 1963, they had many committees on education, economic council, social council, judicial bodies, liberation committees, all sorts of committees. And they met and met and met and met. They are still meeting and meeting and meeting. But we are yet to really address the problems of the continent. I have explained very clearly where the world is. And the world needs fresh thinking. And those who are deprived are the ones who must bring that fresh thinking. Those who are relying on them to be carried on their back will not care about the fresh thinking, as long as they can ride on their back and continue. And those who tell you that if we are free, Europe will not be free are mistaken. The world is interconnected. If the right thing starts in this part of the world, it will also continue in that part of the world. We just need thinkers to bring the break. So our task today is to be convinced that the answers are there. You need a bank that has money to invest in the productive base. Our individual countries can accumulate sovereign national wealth to build the productive base in our individual countries. But cooperatively, Africa can also build banks with sovereign national wealth to mutually support each other. That is what happened after the Second World War. Europe had to establish the World Bank, International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, as well as IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and use state resources to put them in those institutions. So if a European country needs development, they give you aid and you start building your productive base, energy, agriculture, whichever sectors of your economy. If you are trading and there is a deficit, then they assist that other country to be able to buy your goods. IMF will come, give you balance of payment support so that you'll be able to buy the goods. So they facilitated inter-European trade. They piggyback on each other until they could stand and become the European Union. Africa had to do the same, but did not do it. And it's now time to do so. But we must start from individual countries. And the agenda is clear. Build an identity. Force a Gambian identity. Dubois told Nkrumah that independence meant the eradication of all our differences, our division into ethno-linguistic groups, religious groups, all the sectarian groups had to come to an end so that we can become one. That's what independence meant, to become a sovereign people, a sovereign person, cooperatively a sovereign people. So as young people, do not live here today and do not listen to what is being said without signing a contract today for your future. That we must not repeat the happenings that brought us to where we are. We must break it. There must be a breaking point. The breaking point is, number one, I myself will now define who I am. And that I am a Gambian, I'm an African, I'm a human being. And I will not be a lesser person from henceforth. This will define who I am. If any lesson is to be learned, that is the first fundamental lesson to be learned, to build up identity. That's why Marcus Garvey did what he did, to fight for you to have an identity. That's why Nkrumah did what he did. Cabral, all these people, Lumumba, they did so that you can have an identity. When Lumumba was dying, that's what he wrote, that his children will defend the sovereignty of Congo. So we are the ones who must defend the sovereignty of the African continent. We start by our sovereign existence. We are sovereign. Collectively, we build the sovereignty of the Republic and the people. So let's make that decision. Number two, we must agree that we must have self-determined development. We must have the knowledge, the experience, the know-how to develop our continent. So we must demand that type of education. Education that prepares us to be sovereign people, education that prepares us to ensure self-determined development. That is absolutely essential. Number three, we must be prepared to move to the next phase, that government must exist for the people. So therefore, our duty as sovereign people is to begin to make a choice. Choice of who should lead our nations and who should lead the continent. Not only to look for who should lead, but also to say, I am ready to lead by preparing yourself to be the material who will be able to lead. So you have that dual responsibility to choose those who will ensure that we have a government that exists for the people and be among those people who will be part of that government that will ensure that government exists for the people. That is the task. And finally, we must see that the continent must be united, because the wealth in it is sufficient not only to make Africa to exist, but to make the whole world to exist, because the whole world had depended on this wealth for centuries to exist. So therefore, it's our duty to begin that journey of coming together in this type of environment, engage in constructive conversation to share our knowledge so that each of us can become fully mature in mindset to be able to take a stand and sign that bold contract with country and people, continent and people, humanity, that I live so that others can live, not I live for others to die. My existence must not be at others' expense. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Halifa Sallah. Quite a very inspirational lecture. I believe, of course, our viewers definitely are really informed, and I know there's a lot of things that has been learned from this very important discourse or lecture, no matter however you want to call it. We want to thank you once again, and we appreciate the time given. And I know, of course, time is not on our side, but I just maybe wanted to give you 10 minutes to summarize what you have just said in English into the local language, and then I will entertain few interventions from the viewers here, and I'll check if I will have one or two comments online to read out, or maybe to ask if there's any, before we would round up this very important lecture or conversation. So I'll come back to you, and of course I am tempted to ask so many questions, haven't listened to what you have said, but I know time wouldn't allow it. And of course I know viewers, they will also want to say a thing or two after already listening to what you have said. So I just allow you, Honorable, to summarize, maybe in Wolof and Mandinka, just briefly, and then before we'll shift the conversation to the public, so they can also have a thing or two to say. Yeah. Ma bàyyi la rek nga tënk li nga doon waxtaanee ci anglais, parce que waxtaan bi am na solo.
soo gisee ñuy koo def ci anglais ñu ngi waxtaan àddina yëpp.
Gis naa loolu sax si bu baax a baax.
waaye xam nañ ne ñoo yéen a dëkk.
waaw
te yéen moom ITV waxtu woo leen ñu ooyee mun nañoo laalaat ci yi di yaatal ñu ngi ci seen loxo daal.
baax na
te gëm nañu ne ñun mii nekk fii tey suñ ci paree itam dinañu dem ci xool yi di amaat ay waxtaan yu yaatu, moo tax dañ laal banqaas yu bëri ci biir waxtaan bi ndax mu nekk ay bunte waxtaan buy law di dem.
Definitely ndax waxtaan bi yaatu na, am na solo, lépp du fi xej. waaye li nga fi jot a waxtaanee junj ko.
liñ ci jund nag mooy ne dafa am lu xew ci suufi South Africa. xew-xew boobu ci 1976 daanaka métti woon na lool ndax jamono boobu nit ku jur doonutoon dara ci South Africa. ñi ñëwoon nekk ay gan dañ ñëw jël réew ma ci seen loxo nangootuñ nag pour ñu yëngatu xale yi nag ñuy leen a jàngal te gisuñu woon njëriñ ci jàng mi moo tax ñu jógoon ne fi mu nekk nii daal ñoom gannaaw ñu ngee jàngal tubaab yi nekkoon foofu jàng bu baax boo xam ne suñ si paree dinañ mun a jëriñ seen bopp ñoom ñuy leen a jàngal loo xam ne mënatuñ cee jëriñu ñu génn nag ci mbedd mi di wone seen naqar ci loolu di woote da daal nañ wecc jàng mi ñu jël ay bal daal di ko sox rey ci lu toll ci téeméeri xalel mu métti woon lool moo tax nag bi South Africa ñëwee ba nara moom boppam Nelson Mandela dooroon yëngatoom yi ak tubaab yi nekkoon foofu pour ñu mun a jublu ci moom seen réew mbootaay Afrique bi toogoon nañ gis ne pour gunge leen baaxoon na ñu jagleel bés bi muy bés bi biñ fàddee xale yooyu muy fukki fan ak juróom-benn ci weeri juin wi ñu jagleel ko xale li Afrique ne xale li Afrique yi daal war nañ leen a bàyyi xel ci bés bi bés bii nag dañ gis ne suñ ko jaglelee xale yi te ñu ne doomi Afrique lañ ko jagleel bon suñ ko buggee sàmm nañ ko war a sàmmee su jotee dañ war a toogaat ñu seetaat ndawi Afrique yi ci lan lañ ne ci jamono bi ñu toll ba lii xeweek léegi lana soppeeku ci seen dundin yan jafe-jafe la ñoo jànkoonteel ne foog ñu jël ci ay jéego ndax lu bari su xewee soo ci bàyyee xalaat rek daf laa dimbale ba doo ci delluwaat wala soo ci dellu woon itam di nga seetaat pour ëlbatiwaat doxalin jëm fi nga xam ne mooy fi génn li nga xam ne nag mooy waxtaan wi dañu ne war nañoo seet fi doomi Afrique jëm ak fi Afrique jëm ndax doomi Afrique ak Afrique doole mun a taxaale ndax yow gis nga ko ci mboolem loo xam ne lii luy dundale rek foog mu am jiw waaw loo xam ne lii amul jiw du mun a continuer di dund waaw gannaaw ndaw yi ñooy jiw suufi Afrique bon nag suñ leen sàgganee rek sàggane nañ ëllëgi Afrique moo tax ñu boole ñaar yi nañ seet fi Afrique jëm ak fi ndaw yi jëm liñ ci wane nag mooy ne ñàkk gi bari na lool ci suufi Afrique fi mu nekk ndax benn téeméeri junne millions yi benn junne millions yi nit ak juróom téeméeri million ñoo nekk ci suufi Afrique ak ñeneen téeméeri million ñoo nekk ci suufi Afrique wane juróom téeméeri million ñett fukk yaak lu topp yëpp ñu ngi ci ñàkk goo xam ne dafa jéggi dayoo ñu ne bon nag te ñi ëpp ci loolu mooy xale yi waaw lu waral ñàkk googu lee baatu nañ fi ne soo seetee suñu réew yi ñu ngi fees ak bor soo laajtee ñu ne Gambie benn téeméeri junne million fukki junne million ci bor te bor bi ñu ngi cee fay mu ngi métti lool
bari na tamit
waaw bari na lool réewi Afrique boo xalaat rek noonu waaw ñu isi ci biir waxtaan wi ne lenn li day mu ngee xew te nekkuñ di ko gëstu ndax nekkuñ di nax suñu njiit yi ndig ñàkk xam-xam ak ñàkk gëstu ndax soo seetee suufi Afrique Amérique tey soo seetee seen bor yi nekk na ñett fukki junne billion ak juróom-benni junne billion loolu soo ko buggee taawil kenn xamul ni mu toll ëpp na li nga xam ne moom la Amérique di liggéey ci at muy ñaar fukki junne billion ak juróom-ñeenti junne billion 29 trillion mu mel ni bon ñoom li ñoo jël ci bor ëpp na ñoom li ñoo liggéey te bori Amérique ci at mi lu toll ci fukki junne billion daf ko war a jëlee ci ñiy ñëw dénk Amérique xaalis pour mu yokkal leen intérêt ñu ko ooyee bon foofu laa war a jëlee ji xaalis boobu pour mun a fay boram bi bon nag ñoom am nañu pexe di jël di dugal di génnee di dugal li leen may loolu nag dafa am doxalin bu nekk ci àddina bi fi mu nekk nii ne balaa laa mun a jox xaalis dafa fekk ne mun ngaa fay waaw léegi ñooñu nag ay ñetti bunta moom lañ taxawal ci àddina bi ñoom lañ jox doole boobu nga xam ne ñooy seet réew mii ne yow daal sa doole fii la em doo mun a jël bor bi waaye kii dooleem em na fii mun naa jël bor boobu waaw léegi ñooñu ñu ngee tax ñii mun a am bor bay mun a saafaraal seen jafe-jafe yi ci bor waaye ñeneen ñi mënuñoo am bor pour saafaraal seen jafe-jafe ci bor loolu lañ wane ne àddina bi doxalinam borom xam-xam yi dañ ko war a seggaat bon nag Afrique dafa war a jëlaat borom xam-xamam yi mu tàggatat leen def seen xel ndax ñenn ci borom xam-xam yi soo waxtaanee ak ñoom dañu ne ñun suñ bor yi noonu la mun a nekk ndax Amérique ngay jël bor China ngay jël bor ñeneen a ngay jël bor lu tax ñun tam duñ jël bor ñoom seen xel foofu la leen yóbbu te gisuñ ne yow sa bor bi ak bor yi ñële yi dafa wuutee ndax ñoom si seen bor bi mun nañ ci amaat beneen taranga yow moom doo ci mun a am taranga googu yow dañ la koo xañ bon nag nga war a xam nag ne bon façon yi bor yooyu mbiri bor boobu sax lañ war a seetaan wan nañ ci biir waxtaan wi ne fi xam-xam bi réeree mooy fiñ day dugal alal ndax ci réew yi nekk boor boobu ci gàttal rek pour xel yi mun a ñaw ne soo seetee am na buur bu nekkoon ci Mali lim amoon ci alal ci wàllu urus bari waay ba dafa bari woon ba nga xam ne daf doon dem Màkka yóbbu wàlle nag ay gëlëm yu bari ay fas yu bari feesal leen ak saaku urus di ko mayee ci yoon wi dem ba Égypte nga xam ne lam mayee ci Égypte rek ci Cairo ci jamono boobu ku nekk ci dëkk ba dafa am xaalis bi nga xam ne amatuñ marchandise liñ amoon rek mooy urus bi ndax amatuñ luñ mën a jënd di ko jënd ku nekk rek la nga am ci urus jënd
am nañ daanaka
am nga ba jënd li nga xam ne bagage yi yëpp jënd nañu ko mu nekk nag ay jëndante ak jaayante bu nekkoon nag ci diggante réewi arab yi ak réew yi nekkoon boori Mali ñu wane ci loolu ne kooku si jamono boobu xam nga mënutoon a xam ne alal ji mu yore woon su ko dencoon ci banque ni koon jënd na Égypte jënd na yeneen Europe ne loolu mooy banque ñii liñ def gannaaw gi mooy ne dañ fexe alal jiñ doon jëlee ci Afrique yëpp muy urus yeeg jamono yeeg yëpp dañ ko jël sampee ko banque boobu nekk na bunti xaalis boo xam ne soo soxlee ñu lebal la ku soxla ñu lebal la gis nga Saudi Arabie fi mu nekk ci diwam li ñoo samp fii yëpp si suufi Gambie fan lañ koy jëlee si seen bor yi lañ koy jëlee ñoom fu ñu jëlee xaalis bi mooy ci oil bi ñu doon jaay mu mel ni nag ñun suñu réew yi loolu lañ manqué le am na borom xam-xam yi mel ni Nkrumah loolu la leen doon wax ne li ñii di def ba samp seen banque yi seen alal yi ñoo jaay yëpp ñu faa dugal xaalis bi nga xam ne xaalis bi léegi dinañ ko mun di leble di ko jox ñoom itam seen nit ñi ñuy mun a suqali seen koom-koomi réew ne Afrique itam lii la waroon a def bon nag ci gàttal li ñu wax ci waxtaan wi mooy ne dañ war a seetaat suñu bopp ndax ñi fexe woon ba Afrique moom boppam et toogoon nañ ñoomi neen ba xare bu jiitu ba ci xare àddina bi ñu toogoon waxtaan fan lañ war a yóbbu Afrique te ñoom gisoon nañ yoon wi te dañu sampaloon fukki ponk benn ponk bi dañu waxoon ne li nga xam ne mooy suuf si ak alal ji ci nekk yëpp nit ñi ñoo ko moom
ci réew bu nekk
ci réew mu nekk nekkul alali nguur alali nit ñi la
doomi réew mi la
bon nag buñ gisee te alal ne nguur a moom dañu ne alal nit ñee moom ñoom loolu lañ santaane woon ne gannaaw buñ ko waxee nag dañ war a fexe nit ñi moom suñ soxlee suuf soosu pour liggéey ñu fexe jox leen suuf su doy boo xam ne bii lañ ca bëgg a liggéey dañ ko mun a liggéey ndax mun koo dundee xam nga loolu bunte la te mu ñoo woon lan lañ waroon a def ñaareel bi mu wane ne même soo bàyyi nit mu isi xaalis ci sa réew kooku aayul wane nag ñaari yëf ñoom ñu ne bu ko nangu mooy mu ñëw ci sa réew di jëriñoo sa nit ñi pour njëriñi boppam bu ko nangu mu ñëw ci sa réew yow lii sa alali réew mu jëfoo ko ba mu jeex ci sa loxo moom mu jëriñoo ko ne bu ko nangu ne ñaar yooyu buñ ko nangu ci suufi Afrique te loolu rek lañ nangu tey
waaw doy na waar loolu bari na ci de
loolu lañ nangu tey
bari na ci torop
waaw ñu ne ñett bi itam nañ fexe soo leen a jox itam nañ dugal seen xaalis na nga am foo leen emale ci waxtu ndax yow sa yokkute mun naa ñëw bi nga xam ne soo leen joxoon 20 at ak juróom nga ñëw ci juróomi at yow am nga alal ju doy boo mun a jëlaatee loolu doo ko mun a jël seen loxo fekk signé nga kayit bon na balaa ngaa signé kayit seetal ne segg nga seet ndax yow sa réew juróomi at lii doo ko mun a jëlal sa bopp su fekkee ne loolu la nga ne ko fii laa emale juróomi at ndaxte ci biir juróomi at yi man dinaa am doole pour li ngaa def ma mun koo defal suma bopp waaw mu mel ni yii mooy xalaat yi ñu dugaloon ci jiiti Afrique yi ne nii lañ war a yoree Afrique ñu dem itam wane ne ku ñëw itam di liggéey ci sa réew nga may ko foog nga jël lempo ci moom pour lan pour njàng mi pour lopitaan yi pour mbiri fi dëkkuwaay yi pour yoon yi mu mel ni loolu moo war a nekk liggéey nguur koo may mu ñëw pour am alal ci sa réew foog nga jël lempo ci moom pour dugalaat ko li jëriñ sa doomi réew ñu gën a dëgëral itam ne nañ fexe ñu génn jaam yaa ci suufi Afrique ndax doomi Afrique moom bopp nañ fexe doole soxor yooyu yëpp nañ ko génne ci suufi Afrique nañ fexe li nga xam ne mooy liggéeykat bi itam ñu sàmm ko ndax mooy jural réew alal nañ ko sàmm defal loi yu baax yoo xam ne ni mu war a li mu war a am ci liggéeyam ak ni mu war a dundee nañ ko sàmmal ñu ne war nañoo fexe itam ci njàng mi ne doomi Afrique bu nekk ci sa làkk di nga ci mun a bind di nga ci mun a jàng
ci li nga làkk bi nga namp
bi nga namp war nga caa mun a bind mun see jàng mun koo riit ak itam làkki bi nga xam ne réew mi jël na ko pour mu nekk doxalina ñu ne emul ci loolu war ngaa mun a am métier ñu jàngal la métier itam boo xam ne bii di nga ko mun a yokk ci réew mi ñu ne ticce yi itam dañ leen war a tàggat jàngal leen ci wàllu aada ndax ñu mun a jàngal nit ñi li nga xam ne mooy ñu am cër seen réew xam itam ni ñu war a doxale am jikko yu baax nga xam ni nga yaree seen jikko war yar leen ci xam-xam itam te ñu ne ñooñu dañ nekk ñi nga xam ne ñoo yoreel doomi réew mi bon nag réew mi moo leen war a yore ñu ne jàng mi réew mi moo ko war a yore kenn waru caa fay
macha allah
ci bi ñoo jàngal itam kenn warut a fay dañ ko war a jàngal pour mu jàngal waaw mu mel ni yii daal bokk na ci waxtaan yi
am na solo jërëjëf honorable kontaan nañ ci baax ci ni nga ko tënkee xam naa ne waroon naa gën a mun a yaatu ndax wax naa ko sànq am na lu bari war nañ ci mun a waxtaanee gën koo leerlu pour ñi seetaan tamit gën a xam jubluwaay waxtaan bi waaye jàpp naa ne lim ci tënk rek am na solo te ñu bari li tubaab bi wax ne takeaway foog naa ne ñun ñii seetaan yi am na ku nekk am na la yóbbaale sa kër tey nga mun koo fanaanoo suba boo yeewoo nga mun a yeewaat ak beneen xalaat ak beneen gis-gis sa taxawaay si sa réew taxawaay surtout ci ngir Afrika gom naa ne loolu day am solo gannaaw buñ gërëmaatee honorable ci jàngat bi ak ci waxtaan bi xam naa ne léegi dinañ may opportunité ñu fi nekk bu fekkee am na benn ñaari nit rek xam naa time bi nag baritul bu fekkee am na ñu bugg a contribute ñu may leen opportunité bi ñu laajte benn ñaar wala fekkee am na luñ ci bugg a yokk rek suñ gars yi bu see naka wala ba seeni mic bu fekkee ne mu ngi fi nga indil ko gars yi bu dee am nañ ku bugg a mais bi apprécier tamit waxtaan bi comme ñëw nañ ba fii ñu may leen that opportunity ñuy fàttali yéen ñuy seetaan rek yéen a ngi ànd ak Eyeafrica TV ci special live broadcast bi nga xamante ne dañ leen ko indil ci public lecture bi nga xamante ne dañ ci ànd ak Hon.Halifa Sallah nekk ki nga xamante ne ku ñu ràññee la taxawaayam ci réew mi Gambien si bari danañ faral di bu baax a baax di yàkkamti muy wax di bugg a dégg ci moom ci surtout ci mel nii ndax day jàngale day yeete te ñëpp xam nañ tamit taxawaayam ci réew mi moo tax ñun dinañ sawar am ak moom waxtaan yu mel nii te ni mu ko waxee incha allah day continuer ci yeneen édition yuy ñëw incha allah su ko defee bu dee mic bi pare na ba seeni anybody who want to say something ok jox ko kooku waaw you can just use the mic introduce yourself you are free to speak in any language fekki am na loo bëgg a laaj wala
yo salamu alaikum nte to mu buba sawleti
okay
so mbe Hon.Halifa Sallah konton la kendeke
baraka
ani minu baby jang yemini invite nim public lecture so mbe konton na nkarambata janne ay Pan-Africanism min fo nga demande rich history le bara ay definitely karambata bulle
mashallah
wala objective ila wongan ya kendo natara Africa ya wonomanu alhamdulillah bari bul taram bulole bulata kaya fo nyame so mba ni mbara la wala bari nga concern le soto la fita ni kala wala minyimti ko election o tuta sanji killing kari wora sila fo doybe sila le fo campaign wato doye wuli leadership kata campaign along between few months or for amandari shine ka bo shine la ka wuli kata community radios TV and outreach programs kata moli karandi katandi mola munana adarta karte di do la shine
okay
so on lafta ni kawolo because definitely ntenga feel ko kawuli shine
Abarka, thank you very much. Maybe we take one more before Honorable will respond to that. Okay, we have another gentleman here. Johal, the next to him, all right. So you can also introduce yourself and then...
Baraka Bake, Honorable Sallah, Ntetomo Ansumanaleti, yet Tariko follow Damento, well in South Africa, Dindungal Wulta ka apartheid kele. Koy be karandi kan karandi si famine malafala ila nyanto e masoto sai alinga feli ke ban sama Gambia ani Africa ila miroto karansi fa nyumala nyantam bola because sai niya jibe amande ko dindingo nanka momi be karambu ngoto ni kata karam mode ini miralol kata hakanteng e al halo minje suo kono ila wululal mi yalan ko bolo balukan dindugol malafi wala e ka koronto le fan pour ye findi karam mo kono kaaje ko karam mo sam aman nafa so pour itol e nafulo so katabeke yelo wululal bondi fen kono dol bije fenne be kono mi yalan ko sa keno bari ni be tariko fole tarikol mi yalan ko karam ko tollem e bu kala fi ko moy
okay
so be tara class mo kono le bari itol hamo minti ani la famin karana man kili
okay
sa nyanta mum ferel landi la karaw nyanta kele nyaadi le pour sama kama
okay Abarka. So we'll have Honorable to respond to those. I know if we have another one.
Maybe
okay.
You can as many as possible. I'll take all of them.
Okay, please. All right, let's have maybe one more. Yeah. If there's any lady who want to, or if not, then we have from you. Then we'll have one final more here. Okay, you go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ali Sohna.
Speak a bit louder. Yeah.
My name is Ali Sohna, and I want to ask this question that I really want to know, because as a youth and as we term as the future leaders of this country, I think we should learn how to change our mindset into creation, how to change our mindset into innovative ideas, and how to be critical thinkers. And that starts from the classroom or from the schools around the globe. And how can we do that? For us to be nurtured in a way that when we graduate from grade 12 or any of the institution, we will be able to develop our nation. We will be able to bring up new ideas in order for us to change the system, because changing the system is not only by words, but is in the mind.
Okay.
So we need to change our mindset to be ready to develop.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, then we have the final one. There's somebody behind down there. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. My name is Ali Badra Dabu Sambu. I just want to ask Honorable one important question from his lectures. You talk about teachers as being parallel parentals. In this present generation that we are, is it possible to nurture responsible people when there are laws that are stopping you from instilling good values and norms to those kids who have been given too much privilege? Is it possible? Because now I believe the challenge is teachers don't have the right to even treat students or their students like we used to. I could remember when we used to go to school.
Yeah.
We have so much discipline that after school, you dare not even wear your uniform because you don't want your teachers to see you. And now that children are given too much rights, that teachers are even afraid to tell them what is right and wrong. How can we change that? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your valuable contributions. And now we allow Honorable to respond to that. And I know immediately after that, we will allow the conversation. See, I know you will start with the first one.
Yes.
It's more of a practical whatever. So, mom si sourcing alawa. So, nga tonto len si sourcing yom. Wow.
What bete atale? Yalong kuku aning a for dulamu for kumu. Hamo member na wole mu ka ku damuta membe hadamadingol makoy la nga lodula ta na banko la koto continental la koto dunia la koto ite membe jamme ya lonko doybe la sondo moto isi pare fanam pour que doyin ko la miralal bawo pati membe keri nyanta hakkili mal sotola men ka kuol mira ala koto ka wo mirol janjandi isaje ko wol si hadamadingol makoy pour yakafu patima wali fulanyango fanan ni falingo keta wolbe kala hadamadingol te me yalon ko isi place ol mutano e ka memfo isa tamandi woto nyin kacha membe kering a tambita pati kachala la nga menje adum fanan pareta men hammeta men wole mu mbatu nga fofang dunia be ya moy sañi mbe buko nyimbe même fota jang nga safe buko lemu abe fintila atemela na fintita nga president killing soto me yalon ko kabiri mbe Pan-African Parliament abe jelenum mbe committee killing ole kono ka même fo aya kalamuta so mbe tala nga wo buko samba fo ate ya ka fo ko sañi itele siring ñim president sirango kan so akumba yata ye Africa dingol kili me ya lon ko wol be mo hakil maleti al si pare pour que ni ka fo expert bank create pour Africa woto wala mo hakil mal la kafo pour Africa hakil mal la kafo fanam pour Gambia nyalta tala la kering ta farata pour que wo do ko kala ni banko ka hakil mal fanam nyalta tala sotola pour patier doy patier woto momo même pareta pour que wo hakil malti e si fam parendi ni pareta ntol be si fam wafi doyma pour ka fo kon tol be pareta pour ke makoy pour ila ko be si cika anyanta cika la nyame banko fana be wonya afrika be wonya dunia be wonya dunia la fita hakil mal la même be parela pour que la londo ka ke kuti même ben tol be na fal malum fo ko mo senato wala aman sen
I think that's answered his question. The other guy
talked about même fo wala mu toñati ya long men yanta folal nu wala mu banko ni ko a falinta banko dingol le tamu an banko dingol le nyanta kala fosti men ya long ko ila miriya nyanta falindale bari wo tike no la ni man nyaton ko soto men ye kala mutoroke pour kalo muna mu falingote follow 1965 ni ya constitution o jibe 1965 aye mune fo wala mu ha majesty wala mu the executive bari sañ hani ka bi nka mune celebrate 1965 ko wala mu independent longoti bari men keta wotu mo wala mu hakko men ya lon ko inyanta soto la pour ye jong ya julo kuntu nga wole soto bari pour ka wo hakko tamani pour ka jong ya julo kuntu woye men nginen kanu wala mu nga referendum mo soto an wo soto la November in 1965 bari amanta for 1970 woto 1970 nata pour nga jong ya julo kuntu an wala nyanta celebrate la so nte fe e ni ma nyaton ko soto men ye wo ko be kalamuta ye fam parendi ko Pan-Africanism ya fo ñamen ila karambungo yake dulati men ya lonko isi hadamadingol karandi aya fan kalamuta bawo miro wala ka baro wulu baro wala ka jikko kulu woto niye teacher be karandi be hakkilodi diningol la dingol ya bara wala be kala diningol la jikkote anni wo keteno juma fo fatam fa sobe tarala na banko kan ni wato kon fo abe tarala Africa ate tarala Africa bawo folo teacher men ya lonko wala be teacher ya kala bebe kala kilinati an ko kilin le be tarala bulu ibe wala dunde la dindingol la hakkilo kon woto dindingol bebe kala kilinati musu kafuke bebe tarala ñobulu ngalon ko wala mu banko la sembote woto wo karan sifa wala manake adum fanan karango fulalem ntol ñanta balu la ñame nkono wo ñanta kala mutale na banko ñanta kala ñame wo ñanta kala mutale bari membe ndala wo ñanta topato la ñame pour ñun tolbe ayeken balu rangote wo fana mu karangole woto wo be ñanta dunna na karam bungol to wala ñanta kala curriculum mote bari wo man tara kering woto ntol si men keno wala mu ka hakkilol bulandi mol salon ko ñing si keno dol même parata pour ka tamande wala ñanta lola yake ñim banko la ñaton ko
thank you so we have the final two
yes well what he was emphasizing both of them in a way one is the change of mindset
indeed
well you see development in 1919 did not commence because those people were in charge of state power because they were colonized they had to form groups and start to have this type of conversation to inspire each other, educate each other. From 1919 to 1945, they were holding Pan-African congresses. 1945 was the 5th Pan-African Congress. By that time, they had all become resolved that they must go back to their countries to mobilize their people for change. So always there is a process of raising your own awareness, building your own groups, and moving towards your people and then mobilize them to empower them for change. So there is no doubt that when you find that the type of education system or any form of system is not appropriate, then people must work to change it. So it all depends on those people who are now determined to make it their task to come together in order to effect such a change. But in the meantime, we have a country which is a sovereign republic where you have freedom of expression, freedom of association, so nothing stops people from having this type of conversation that may not be even on a partisan basis, but to exchange ideas and build consciousness so that whatever is the solution, all of us will be able to see it. And I believe that is really the way forward, not just to fold our arms and look at things. We must know that there is something I can do, then take a step and start doing it.
Okay.
Then we'll get to the right direction.
Yeah.
Well, what he emphasizes also very clear,
the role of teachers,
that a system tends to dictate what you are to do.
Yeah.
I've heard the president say they don't teach how to govern a country in a school. That he has never seen any school that teaches people how to govern a country.
That is our very own president.
Well, I don't know who has said it. but essentially,
yes,
it is the responsibility of that president to have a school that does that teaching. So if that president acknowledges that that school does not exist, is that not a failure? It is just showing that that's a system failed. It shows that that educational system has failed. Why are you educating people? It's for them to know how to govern a country.
Absolutely.
So can anybody say some of us don't know how to govern a country? You know, for me, I have been in the Pan-African Parliament. I have been in the ACP EU Parliamentary Assembly. I think my voice is still being heard, you know, when this Ukraine thing, you know, these people were saying that Africans must do what they want. And right there, I challenge, none of them dared to say anything to challenge what was said. And that is what stood. So in reality, you know, there are people who know how to govern. And if I were to be invited to MDI and say, do the teaching, I will be able to teach them how to govern a country. But they are not interested in that because you will feel that those students will go against the government. You don't want them to learn the knowledge of how to govern a country because you will believe that they will be opposing your government. That is their problem. That is the problem of Africa, that they don't want the people to learn, because if people have knowledge, you feel that they will replace you. That is the problem. And that is what must happen. We must come to a point where we see that everybody owns Africa, everybody owns our country, and everybody must have the knowledge to know how to govern so that we can constantly replace each other in whatever we do. That is really what is essential.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think it's just the good point to end this conversation. We want to thank you, Honorable, again, for availing us this opportunity to listen, to learn, and of course to the thousands, if not millions of viewers who are out there who are watching or would watch this conversation later on. And we want to appreciate the time you have taken to be here and help us discuss some of the things that you have highlighted in this very important public lecture. It has been quite a very inspirational one, I want to say, and we want to thank him so very much. Thank the people that are also here who took time to be here to join this conversation. It's also good we have that interaction and some of the feedbacks that we also have gotten. We appreciate that. Thank you very much, Honorable. Kontaan nañ bu baax ci teewaay bi ci waxtaan bi foog naa ne Gambien bu ne foo munta nekk ak bu ku nekkut Gambien sax boo dégloo da nga xam ne ku xam li moo wax moo doon wax xam-xam moo lañ doon wax waaye jàngale tamit askan bi moo taxoon ñu am jotaay ji am solo bile ñu ngi lay gërëmaat bu baax dañ lay bàyyi rek ci ñu delloo la kaddu ci amee looy tàggoo ñu doon seetaan laata ñoo yëkkati jotaay bi gannaaw bu ñu lay gërëmee ñu jaajëfalaat la bu baax bàyyi la nga tàggoo ba beneen yoon incha allah kon partnership bi lëkkaloo bi diggante Africa ak ak yow ak parti bi day continuer incha allah ñu continuer di engage public bi ak Gambien si di waxtaan ak ñoom ci lu mel ni jërëjëf.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think the objective is very clear. All right. Is to open up a national conversation. And that is why we have not taken a partisan forum.
Indeed.
We have opened up a national conversation.
Yeah.
We are sure that the person who has spoken there about the Doi party, those conversations will also start within the party itself.
Absolutely. Okay.
It is a party that does not engage in that conversation will ultimately die. So it is important for Doi to move into that, and also for Gambia to move into that, for Africa to move into that. And for me, I see myself as a pioneer of that particular trend. Okay. My duty now as a person at this age is to open up this conversation so that we have a forum where we can engage in a dialogue and make sure that we know exactly what is wrong with Gambia, with Africa, with the world, and then what to do about it.
Thank you.
That I'm ready to move in that direction. Pare na ci wàllu fànn googu ne àddina du mun a jëm kanam mukk fekk borom xel yi taxawuñu di liggéeyee ak xel di waxtaan ak askan wi wala waxtaan ak suñu ñoñ ci suufi Afrique wala suñu ñoñ ci àddina bi ndax ñu yokkante xel ci liy jafe-jafe àddina bi ak naka lañ ko war a saafara ne waxtaan yi amul rek pour nekk waxtaani parti ci biir parti Doi loolu waxtaan wuy jib si la te xam naa ne waxtaan wuy yaatu si la te itam ci réew mi itam waxtaan wuy jib si la te wuy yaatu la man nag suma warugal fi mu nekk mooy fexe téye waxtaan woowu ndax mu egg fi mu war a jëm mooy daal lu ma mun a def ci àddina ba gis ne réew mi waxtaan nañu ba Afrique waxtaan nañu àddina bi waxtaan nañu ba ñu gisaat yoon wi nga xam ne mu ngi leer nañ ne foofu lañ war a jëm waaye gannaaw ñi leen ngee jëriñu duñ ko yàkkamti ñim jëriñul ñooñu xamuñ sax ci liñ nekk waaw mu mel ne nag fekk xamuñ ci liñ nekk duñ mun a puus ñale itam ñu xam ne ci liñ nekk du noonu te mun nañoo demee nii nañ ñun ñëpp ñu xëcc yaakaar naa ne daal suñ ko defee rek lépp baax
jërëjëf honorable ñu ngi lay gërëmaat bu baax di la sant
nga même bambandi wala moo wooti ko watole men ya lonko tonya nte dunna kangol beto bari isi programme soto men ya lonko insa dundino kangol beto wala kumata angale kongo dunya bele ka moy bari a folo sikol damuta wonya bari labango ntolbe nyanta kala kacanyo yati isa joko fahamuro si lafa ni fahamuro lafa ta dron ntolbe ba kala mutala musilo la nyanta tamala ntolbe ngabo
barka bake thank you very much thank you Honorable Halifa Sallah ci waxtaan bi ñu ngi ko gërëmaat bu baax di ko sant ci nim ñu kos bu naa wax ne ni mu jàngalee tey ci liñ doon waxtaanee ponki waxtaan bi mooy di day of the African child taxawaay doomi Afrique si seen réew waaye ci Afrique ci boppam Pan-African mentality boobu ni ñu gisee suñu bopp ni ñu gisee suñu réew dafa jàpp ne war nañ soppeeku war na cee am pour ñu mun a xeexal suñu bopp mënu njëriñ tamit ndax dañoo wax ne Africa is the future waaye boo xoolee tey Afrique nu mu mel ñàkka ji bëri na réew mi aduna Afrique daanaka ñu ne mooy loolu daal yéen a ma gën a xam waaye xam naa ne ci waxtaan yu mel nii incha allah dinañ gën a yaatal waxtaan bi gërëmaat Honorable Halifa Sallah ci ñëw bi ak ci waxtaan bi gërëm tamit kilifa yu fi teew ci ni ngeen ñëwee ci jotaay bi ñu ngi ko rafetlu di leen sant ak ay ndaw yu fi teew yëpp ñu ngi leen di jaajëfal baax yéen suñu viewers tamit ñu ngi leen di sant baax di leen gërëm ci ànd bi ngeen di ànd ak Eyeafrica TV saa yi nekk bu ñu indee waxtaan yu mel nii wala yeneen jotaay yu am solo ñu ngi ko rafetlu bu baax a baax di leen sant di leen gërëm baax ci safo bi waaye tamit ci kóolute bi di leen jox dig daje wala rendez-vous ci beneen édition ci yeneen waxtaan fii ci Eyeafrica TV di leen wax jërë ngeen jëfati ñu fanaan ak jàmm babaay jërë ngeen